Thank you, Celeste, for that fine introduction, and thanks to all the attendees out there as well as our hosts. I'm always excited to meet a new audience and evangelize a little bit about this because I think OpenStreetMap is awesome in and of itself, but I think it really excels as a teaching tool for geography. So let's dive right in here. I think Celeste kind of outlined what we want to cover, but we want to give you kind of the what and the why about OpenStreetMap. And specifically, to give you a little bit of background about the project itself, then make the case for why it's so awesomely cool to use in your classroom. And as Celeste indicated, we will wrap up with creating your OpenStreetMap accounts and a walkthrough. I'd like to start this out by talking about open and what we mean by open. And it's bandied about quite a bit in information technologies nowadays, the word open. And what we're talking about here is open data. OpenStreetMap is essentially about open data. Open refers to how the data, the product is licensed, and the compare and contrast I'd like to do is if you open up Google Maps in a tab and look in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a terms on there. And to contrast the terms and conditions for Google Maps with that of OpenStreetMap, if you point your browser to OpenStreetMap and click on copyright, you'll see that you are able to give you're able to give away the data as long as you give it away and use it under the same terms that you receive it. So open data here refers to data that are free from proprietary restrictions in this. And it's important to note that it's important to contrast OpenStreetMap data with Google data because we frequently get the question, why don't we leave it to Google? And we'll talk about that as we go through this presentation. Why there are compelling reasons to use OpenStreetMap vis-a-vis Google. But all OpenStreetMap data are licensed under the Open Database license. So in what way is OpenStreetMap open? Well, just to give you some shorthand here, OSM is kind of a shorthanded way for referring for OpenStreetMap. So throughout this presentation and throughout our conversations, you'll hear us talk about OSM, which is shorthand for OpenStreetMap. But the key difference here is OpenStreetMap is crowdsourced, and by that means that anybody who's got an observation to make can contribute it to OpenStreetMap. Because of that, OpenStreetMap is often referred to as the Wikipedia for maps because any of us can sign up for an account and we can begin to add features to the map that are important to us and edit the map in ways that reflect the reality that's on the ground. Let's be clear also about the name of the project. It is not three separate words, Open Street and Map, or even Open Street Maps, but OpenStreetMap. Let's flow through here. A little bit about
Stephen,
yes.
Do you mind putting it in present mode and then can you put it in present
Oops.
mode? Should be behind maybe it's, yeah, right next to share. Keep going down with your cursor next to share and there's present.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Bear with me. I have a lot of panels to move around on my screen here.
So keep, no, see where your circle is? See over here, your circle on the right-hand side. Okay, see share, then there's present. Hit present.
I'm sharing my screen. Let's see.
No, see that, yep, right there. That's, yep, your cursor's right on it. Present. There you go. Oh, nope. There's share, not share, no share, present.
Sorry, I've got two different things on my, oh, you know what? I think I'm looking at the presentation, you are not. So let me, stop this for a second. I think I know what the problem is. Let me. Yeah.
Now you need to share your screen.
Okay. Oh, I see what the problem is. Now it should be okay. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. A little bit about OpenStreetMap US. OpenStreetMap US is a local chapter of the OpenStreetMap Foundation, which is headquartered in the UK. That's where OpenStreetMap started. As we said before, anyone can join. There are over 1 million mappers that are contributing to the OpenStreetMap right now. OpenStreetMap US, as the local chapter in the United States, sponsors conferences, awesomely cool conferences about mapping and geography. And we have mapathons, hackathons, and a lot of like mappy hours and things like that. And I would encourage any of you to join us for any of those. I'm going to fly through this slide pretty quickly, but what I want to call attention to is that one in the middle there, 2010. As you may remember, in 2010, there was a large earthquake in Haiti. And this was really a turning point for the OpenStreetMap project when people got together and said, hey, we can get all sorts of aerial imagery and we can trace the roads and buildings from aerial imagery and put that on OpenStreetMap. And so people did. We all got together around the country in various mapathons and started tracing satellite imagery. And that was kind of the first realization that we could use this for some really awesome purposes. And in fact, during the 2010 earthquake, OpenStreetMap became the default map for rescue and recovery for the earthquake. So that was a huge event. This graph just shows the growth in registered users. That's 6 million users here. This slide's just a little bit out of date, but I don't think it loses much. But this well over 6 million now. It's probably 6.5 million mappers here. This is just in terms of the size of the database. I don't know if you can see the numbers on the axis over there, but it's 5,750,000,000 nodes in the database. So it's a ton of data worldwide collected in, and I frankly don't know of any other map that has this kind of coverage. We're averaging about 40 to 50,000 contributors a month on the map. And so it receives substantial amounts of traffic. So how does it work? Let's go through a little bit about the workflows. There's two major workflows. One is the field workflow, and this is the way OpenStreetMap started out in the days of yore. The two pictures up at the top right-hand side of your screen show pieces of paper on a clipboard. And what we do is we print out a piece of the map, we put it on a clipboard, and we go out into the field and we take notes like you see these two people doing here on the picture. And we go back to the library, coffee shop, pub, wherever we go, school for that matter, and we upload everything to OpenStreetMap, review the data quality, and we admire our work. The second thing, and this is what we'll introduce you to in the course of the next few webinars, is the armchair workflow, where we define an area of interest and we create a project that multiple users can use. And we all go and we take a chunk of that project, that chunk of that area of interest, and we add all the buildings, add all the roads and all the other features to it onto OpenStreetMap and review the data quality. This picture, by the way, is from a mapathon that took place at George Washington University, where I teach, a year or two ago. The OpenStreetMap data structure is dead simple. It's there's not a native polygon. If you're a GIS user, you'll notice that there's not a native polygon structure to this. But we do have nodes, ways, and we accomplish quite a bit with just these simple data types in terms of being able to encode complex geometric relationships like relations and things like that, which are important if you're mapping, say, interstate highways or federal routes and things like that. The ecosystem around this, this is just a list of users. They are large institutional users that use OpenStreetMap. You may recall back in 2012, Google decided to raise the prices for access to Google Maps. And a lot of these users, institutional users, took a look at their use of Google Maps and said, is it really worth it? You know, could we get by with OpenStreetMap? Is it good enough for our uses? And a lot of these organizations said, indeed it is. And so they made the switch. There is a well-developed and growing set of tools and utilities and services that are built around OpenStreetMap. There are editing collections. We'll talk about ID Editor later, which you'll have a chance to use. I'm hoping that we will get into field papers as well, which is our dead simple paper data gathering things. We also have, quality control tools and image capture tools. The image capture tools are kind of interesting. It's a new development that allows you to create a open source Google Street View, if you will. And that collaboration corner there at the top right is rather important. We work rather closely with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, which is a large NGO that does a lot of its work based on OpenStreetMap. And of course, Teach OSM, which is the organization that we're a part of, that encourages, promotes the use of OpenStreetMap for education. In a larger sense, the community, which in an open source project, community is half of the project. And so who is in that community? Well, students, of course, teachers and educators like yourselves. There is a large humanitarian group of users like Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, but also Ushahidi and a number of other NGOs that rely heavily on OpenStreetMap for this. There is, I don't know if any of you are runners or cyclists, but if you're a Strava user, Strava users are another growing contributor for recreational and civic use of people, uploading their trails and their bike routes and things like that, particularly important for off-road kinds of uses. And of course, there are regular, just, plain old vanilla contributors, as well as the data consumers that I mentioned above, and a whole army of developers that keep the machinery running for us. You might ask if any Joe Schmo can sign up and become an editor. What's to prevent them from plastering the map full of vulgarities, or what's to prevent the Israelis and the Palestinians from engaging in an edit war I'm thinking the Kashmir, which is a contested region of Pakistan and India. What's to prevent them from engaging in all-out edit wars to control the map? There is a data working group that is more and more formally charged with dealing with issues of vandalism, dealing with issues of edit wars and misconduct, plagiarism, things like that, enforcing the copyright, the rules so that people don't copy from Google and put it into OpenStreetMap, things like that. And they increasingly deal with the kind of the overall data quality with that. The OpenStreetMap Foundation, based in the UK, holds the trademark as well as most of the operations there. They also have a strong hand in maintaining the larger OpenStreetMap community. We have local chapters worldwide that represent the interests of different countries on the map. And we have a new code of conduct, and the code of conduct enforces, prohibits, malfeasance across the project, including the mailing lists, including our forums like this, and conferences, and on the map as well. There are four primary sources of data that we have. The old school way is to get out your GPS and walk, and like a dedicated tracing unit, or and even mobile phones. My phone now, I've got several apps on there that I use to record GPS traces, particularly useful in off-road settings, but that's a reliable and the original way that we used to get data into OpenStreetMap. Armchair, which I already talked about, where we're mapping from imagery. Field surveys, where we're using things like field papers that I showed just a few slides ago, but also there are dedicated instruments called Kobo Collect and Open Map Kit, which you can mount on your phone and essentially conduct surveys and censuses with these things. A rather new to the scene method is artificial intelligence and machine learning. There's a project called Map with AI. You might want to look this up. It's a combination of Microsoft and Facebook that have used their smarts and combed through a lot of imagery to augment our mapping capabilities with artificial intelligence. There is, I guess, a whole range of applications, not just applications, but you might say services that are built on top of this. The one I really want to talk with is HealthSites.io, and please take a note of the URL here on this slide. HealthSites.io is a 3-year-old project to record all of basically anything that has to do with health, to put it on the map. This includes hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, also anything to doctors' offices, dentists, anything, apothecaries, anything to do with health around the world. It's a fascinating project, and I've been using it a lot with my students, especially in this era of COVID-19. It's a nice topical project, and it's a great way to contribute useful information in the public sphere. So to wrap this section up here, OpenStreetMap since 2004 has had 16 years of progressive growth. People get concerned sometimes when they think it's an open source project that it must be a hobby project, but this is indeed a stable platform. And as you can see by the number of enterprise and institutional users, there is a lot of interest in the stability of the project. There are a broad and growing ecosystem to support this project as well, in terms of people, tools, and projects in order to maintain and apply the public geographic information. Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about OpenStreetMap specifically in an educational context. There are 3 big advantages that I see to using OpenStreetMap in the classroom. One is that you as teachers and your students develop a direct experience of cartographic science. You are building locational intelligence and spatial reasoning capabilities by using OpenStreetMap, and you are acquainting yourself and your students for geographic processes that occur. And there's no better way to do this than through actually putting things on the map. Is one of the best ways to learn about how maps work. The AP Human Geography curriculum, as good as it is, has precious little in the way of map production or being able to drawn from the cartographic tradition. And so this is a way to get beyond consuming maps, but actually producing maps. And for that reason, I think it's important as a primary geographic learning tool. The other 2 reasons, downstream users benefit from this data. I've talked a little bit about healthsciences.io and people creating public health information, or about the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team using this in Haiti for rescue and recovery. But there's, hosts of other people. If you use Weather Underground, for example, you notice that the maps on there are from OpenStreetMap. So there's all of these downstream users who benefit from your students who are mapping this stuff. So all of the buildings that go on OpenStreetMap, are, all of the roads and all of that information benefits a whole community of people who are using this as institutional users. Lastly, and this is kind of an important thing to me, is the citizen science project. And I know we're talking about digital citizenship and how we can engage how we can harness digital technologies to engage our students in citizenship and civics as an education. If you are engaged in first of all, mapping is inherently a citizen science project. Open mapping is inherently a citizen science project. And if you are engaged in this, then you are engaged in civic education, because you are engaged in making decisions about what goes on the map, what is public information. You're engaged in making land use decisions about, where should the county locate such and such a facility? What lands are suitable for development here? Which lands are not, and why? So you're engaged in the reflexive use of geospatial technologies in order to solve these problems and deal with issues that make a difference in your community. So I really like it for that. Let's dig a little bit deeper through this. We have a lot of students and community groups here. Some of them are pictured here that drive a lot of this project-based learning. One of the youth mappers is, and I'll get to it in a slide or two here, is an organization that was started at George Washington University and a couple other universities, and it's a student organized. It was a student organized chapter. The students, after getting exposed to mapping, we had a mapathon at George Washington University, and a lot of the students thought, this is really cool. I want to just keep doing this. And so they formed this humanitarian mapping society at GW. So here's students who decided that this is an awesome educational opportunity, and they self-organized themselves so that they could keep doing this and drive more of these projects. Here's what a typical mapathon looks like. We get a bunch of pizza. We have a bunch, 30 students in the room. It's, everybody pulls out the laptops. We put up things on the monitors. We have pizza and, soft drinks and everything, and all the students come together. And typically 30 students can easily make tens of thousands of map changes. So it's really an impactful way to do this. Youth Mappers is an organization that has grown. I think there are about 175 chapters worldwide. Now, these are based on college campuses, but they are all like this humanitarian mapping society. They're all student-led, student-run organizations around the world that just conduct mapathons for humanitarian purposes. Missing Maps is another project, and they have a nice little phone app that you can use if you're just dinking around with your phone one day and idly, scrolling. You can put map swipe on your phone, and you're presented with a satellite image scene. And if it's got houses or buildings in it, you swipe right. If it's just jungle or scrub or open water, you swipe left. And so what it does is it narrows down where to look for the world's most vulnerable peoples who aren't on any map. And there are hundreds of thousands, there are millions of people who aren't really on any map. So this is a way to map these things. By engaging in open mapping, you are engaged in experiential learning because you're actively mapping. You're using imagery, and you get exposure to a wide variety of landscapes. You're looking at rural landscapes, urban landscapes, different climates. You're looking at deserts, you're looking at jungles and different things. So you're exposed to a lot of different experiences, as well as different features. And I love teaching this, where we're mapping in different countries, because I always get the question, what is this that I'm looking at on this image? And sometimes we never know, we never figure it out. But the point is that, that ambiguity can be a teachable thing. If you don't know what those things are, it's kind of forces you to deal with your limitations about what you do know and what you don't know, but you're actively mapping things on the ground, and you're learning about different landscapes with this. Those learning benefits that students have is, like I was saying before, have those downstream benefits. Humanitarian uses, I've talked about those, but think about commercial information and data services like Weather Underground and things like that, news and information. Washington Post is a big user of OpenStreetMap. Governments around the world are now adopting this. I have facilitated numerous workshops in the Caribbean. Some of these nations are very small. For example, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I think, is like 160,000 people total for the entire country. They don't have a lot of money for an ArcGIS seat. So rather than invest in an ArcGIS seat, they have trained a lot of citizens to map them. They have mapped their entire road network. They've mapped all the buildings in the country on OpenStreetMap. That's the de facto map for the entire country. So there's a lot of governments that have seen fit to, it's lowered the bar to active mapping for a lot of these institutions. Scientific and research is another one. There's plenty of academic research on ResearchGate that goes into the accuracy of OpenStreetMap, whether how to and people building on OpenStreetMap to extract other research things, population, censuses, migration, demographics, and so forth. Just a few logos from this institutional ecosystem. I won't spend too much on this here. I did mention Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. Please put this on your list of things to investigate after the calls over here. Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team is started in 2011 and has done probably the most to show how you can build and deliver services based on open mapping. So please take a look at OpenStreetMap. Lastly, let's get into cultivating spatial citizenship, because I think this is a real important and a real kind of, it's not really intuitively obvious when you first get into open mapping, but it is a tailor-made citizen science project. I can't reiterate that enough. It's driven by volunteers. The whole project is run by volunteers and amateurs. We incorporate scientific principles, we map what's on the ground, so it's observation based, and more than anything, I think, is if you're mapping, you require some level of engagement in civic issues, and this starts with, like, how do I tag this entrance? Like, what's the meaningful way to tag? What's a meaningful way to describe our world, basically? How do I describe this feature on OpenStreetMap? And I think that is the interesting thing here, is that citizenship is inherently a spatial activity. And this makes it, by open mapping, you're making manifest this location as the organizing principle for civic activities. Now, if your head is nodding north, you should be nodding north and south, but in case it's not, let me give you a few good reasons, I think compelling reasons, why OpenStreetMapping is the way to, is the effective tool you should adopt in your classroom here. Direct learning. I like to think about open mapping as geography at a one-to-one scale. If you are out in the field with a piece of paper scribbling down geographic features, you are engaging with geography at a one-to-one scale, where the map indeed is the territory. And by conducting a street survey, for example, and mapping, you are actively doing geography rather than just consuming it. And through that process, you begin to, develop an understanding of how to read the landscape and how, geographic features influence, different processes. OpenStreetMap complements a lot of other learning in humanities and social sciences and environmental sciences. I like to think that, you know, for example, I've been interested in old roads, you know, migration routes, the Buffalo Trace in southern Indiana, Zane's Trace in Ohio, early, the National Road that started in Baltimore, for example, it's US 40. But understanding and looking at old roads and those sorts of things kind of complements, you know, our understanding of demographics and migration. It complements our, you know, our understanding of geographic processes and why they took place at different, you know, at different places. For example, you know, I grew up in Illinois, but I never knew Chicago grew up there because it was a portage between the Lake Michigan and the Illinois River system. So learning about, you know, through mapping helps us understand why Chicago is where it is. So geography is like a super subject matter integrator. It just, there's nothing else like it for that. It's ideally suited to project-based learning where the inquiry is not so much driven top down by teachers, but led by students, because students can, you know, students can decide what features of interest they want to map, and they can map things that are of interest to the community. And the other thing is giving visibility to things that don't make it to other maps. And these may be, I don't know, things as, you know, mundane as street murals or public art, or you know, significant trees in your neighborhood, things like that. Those are good. You know, OpenStreetMap is the perfect platform to give visibility to those things. Reflexive use of, and by reflexive, what I mean here is that it's the tool that you turn to, you know, it's the tool that you turn to first. And we like to encourage our students to reflexively use geospatial technologies. In other words, if I'm driving from here to Terre Haute, Indiana, how do I get there? I go to Google Maps and I type in Terre Haute, and, you know, from my, you know, destination. But using those geospatial tools is a key skill that we want to embed in our students. We also want them to understand the issues of privacy and security around geospatial information. I have to caution student groups all the time. The first thing they want to do is they want to go and they want to put my house on OpenStreetMap. And I'm like, no, don't, you know, you don't want students to overshare. But, you know, it begins with that, but it also continues on to, like, should they allow Google or Apple to, you know, track everything on their phone? How do they, you know, sensitivity to issues around location, you know, location privacy is another thing that we need to sensitize our students to. And, you know, what are the ethics of cartography and mapping, and how do we instill those within our students? If I haven't mentioned it before, I should mention it now. OpenStreetMap works in the browser. You need not install any special software. There are protocols and norms, but you don't need to say "Mother, may I" if you would like to map on OpenStreetMap. You simply sign up for an account. The data are free. You can export them for downstream use if you want to use those in a desktop GIS. There are no fees, there are no licensing charges. So anyway, through that lower cost, this allows you greater accessibility and availability of good, solid geographic information and teaching tools. And lastly, OpenStreetMap is a great way to embed community service projects, service learning engagements. We get a lot of students who have to do you know, service learning in order to graduate, have, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40 hours of community service or service learning engagements in order to graduate. There are a number of different ways, you know, contributing through humanitarian relief, cleaning up the data, mapping things in your neighborhoods. All of these things, you know, nurture your students' inquiries into geographic information. So I always get the question, well, why not let Google do it? And so I thought I'd do a side-by-side comparison of Google Maps and OpenStreetMap. So here you have, this is an area in Southeast Washington, D.C., Suitland Federal Center, and we have OpenStreetMap on the left, and we have Google on the right. And you can see just the level of detail in terms of well, I'll point out the walking paths, the picnic benches, the bus stops, just the level of detail on the OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap lends itself to kind of this micro level of mapping where we can add benches, rubbish bins, bus stops, parking, park benches, things like that. And let's face it, there's not a local government in the nation who can afford to collect this level of detail. So OpenStreetMap is the perfect kind of the perfect platform for all of this sort of thing. So this is foundational level teaching, I believe, for teaching cartography and geography. I think it is unparalleled for both you and your students to get into open mapping. There are a lot of opportunities, and like I said, it does complement other areas, social studies and environmental sciences, things like that. So, and through this, you can build, valuable social and intellectual capital, both for you and your students, as well as those downstream interests as well. And you can also use this to, as a means to embed civics education. So with that, let's switch gears here, and this will be a more interactive account. So hopefully you all have your keyboards and laptops at the ready and ready to go. So what we want to do now is, assuming that you're all on board with this and you all think this is the best thing since sliced bread, is we can follow through with creating an OpenStreetMap account. And we'll give you some time to begin the ID editor walkthrough. And if we have enough time, we'll point to tasks.teachosm.org, which is our tasking manager. So, Celeste, shall I turn this back over to you, or I'll just hold on to it and we can
keep going. So if you go to the next slide, Stephen.
Here we are.
Okay, and so in order to sign up for an account, you want to go to openstreetmap.org, and you'll come to a screen and it says sign up. And you'll click on that and you will put in your email address and create your account. And you will get in your email, you will receive a message where you will have to verify your account. Sometimes people say, oh, I didn't get it, but make sure you check your junk mail or your spam, because sometimes it might end up in there.
One word of caution, please do not use your email address as your OpenStreetMap username. You don't want that publicly broadcast out there and be a recipient of tons more spam. Number two, if you can, instead of putting David space Smith, put David and no space Smith. It works a little bit better if you just have one continuous word. For example, my username is S.E. Johnson, all one word. And so I would pick a username that's all one thing, no spaces, and don't use an email address. I'll leave this up here and give you time to sign up. Also, this is a good time to ask questions if you have them.
Yes, and feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, I got a question, Stephen. It's not a huge one, but on the last slide, what do we know where that picture was of, or that map was? Look, yeah, right there.
Oh, good question. I think this is I forget, but I think I took this screenshot. I think it's in Italy somewhere, but I can't recall.
This looks interesting.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, there's all sorts of.
So apparently I actually signed up for this in 2017.
Oh, okay.
I guess I haven't used it in a while, but I had an account already, so that worked out.
Special bonus. Give you all another minute to verify your emails and sign up.
I will say that when I was first introduced to it, it was overwhelming. And that's why I wanted to do a 3-part session so that it kind of gave you time to kind of absorb all the information that you received today from Stephen, and then get an account and try to do a walkthrough and try to get familiar with it so that when we meet again next week, you can start thinking about, you can start seeing how it works. And because it is a lot of information coming at you, and I just want to and to do what OpenStreetMapping is all about and try to set up an account and have you map all in one session can get overwhelming. So we just wanted to kind of do it in bits and pieces so that you get more comfortable with doing it. A lot of times when you do it all in one session, people get overwhelmed and they're like, oh, I know about OpenStreetMapping, but I didn't use it. And I think when you do it in small chunks, the information, you're able to process it a little bit easier.
Yep.
Especially today. There's a lot of technical information coming at you today with teachers, with remote teaching.
Yeah. How's everybody doing? Everybody got their accounts? Yep. All right. Okay. So let's do this. If you are signed up, I think we just probably have barely enough time to do the walkthrough.
Well, you might want to explain when you get in OpenStreetMapping, Stephen explained that they're seeing satellite imagery. And
yes,
I guess I didn't. Yeah. So when you get into OpenStreetMapping and you start to map, which this is going to be after you do the walkthrough, you're going to see the satellite imagery. And you can map buildings, you can map roads, you can map pretty much anything. But that's what you'll see. And sometimes those images are clear and sometimes they're not. But as you go through the walkthrough, we'll talk about that a little bit more next week.
Yeah, I'm thinking I might, we have, let's see, about 10 minutes left here. I don't know if that's enough time to leisurely complete the walkthrough. I will say this, let's do this. I'm going to walk you through. Let me stop this for a second. And let me share again. Okay, so here I am on OpenStreetMap here. Let's zoom out a little bit here. You have, if you've completed the sign up, that's the sign up, but let's go through just the typical login. Here's what we would like you to do after the call is over, is clicking on the login, and I'll log in. Okay, now I'm logged in, and I'm going to zoom in here. I'm in the middle of nowhere here in Pennsylvania, but that's okay. What I want to do, and what you should do after this call, is log into OpenStreetMap, click on the edit button, and it doesn't matter where you are. I mean, you can zoom to your hometown. that's fine. And just zoom into a neighborhood, but make sure that you're zoomed in far enough to edit. But when you first log in, and you should try this right now, you'll see a screen that looks like mine. I'll give you a second to get there. So when you first log in, you'll see this binary choice here if you're seeing my screen. One is edit now, the other is start the walkthrough. What I would like for you to do is click on start the walkthrough. And this walkthrough is, I love it because it is clear, it is concise, and it is extremely to the point, and it will take you through all of the basics for editing OpenStreetMap. Now, the cool thing about this is you can kind of skip around to different bits of it here, and then, you know, when you go through the whole thing, it will eventually end with start mapping, and you know, when you click OK, you're back over here. Okay, that's great. Now, what if you want to like do the walkthrough again? Or what if you can't find the walkthrough again? I want you to know here, let's see. If you click on the help screen, the walkthrough is always available from the help screen. So if you can get to the help screen in the ID editor, you can take the walkthrough again from this. Take it 2 or 3 times. There's no harm in doing this. There's a lot to learn. The walkthrough is, you know, you can do it self-paced. You can sit on the couch watching TV and do it basically. And it's fun, you know, and you can make all the mistakes you want because none of your fat-fingered stuff will get, you know, sent to the map. You'll be, you know, you can use it, take it over again, and there's, you know, it's kind of a cost-free training environment. So I would, you know, take it as many times as you want. I'll point out also that the help feature on this is it's robust, but it's all clear and concise. You can click on any of these things, and all of the help is self-contained in this one little window, which I really like. It doesn't kind of take over your computer, but it doesn't interrupt your mapping activities, for example. So very powerful help utility here with that. So, okay, so take the walkthrough. The walkthrough is available from the help screen. And another key thing, you're in the editor and you want to stop mapping. How do you stop mapping? The way to do it is to click on OpenStreetMap. The word's up here in the top left-hand corner. So please make a note of that. So when you click I'll click it right here, stop mapping, and that takes me back to the default OpenStreetMap environment. One other thing you might do is to, is to, let's pick on Chicago here. You can use this Chicago to Vincennes, Indiana. Try routing a little bit with the search box and search for different place names. On the right-hand side over here, there's a lot of different renderings to this. Let's just look at cycle map. If you're a cyclist, this is kind of cool because it's got terrain in it, and you can see if there's any, like here's the cycle trails that show up with this. Transport map has railroads and things like that. So if you, let's zoom over here. Let me pan over, bear with me. What I'd like to do is show, so you can see the subway system in Washington, D.C. with the transport map. This OpenStreetMap is a Norwegian, and this showed up about 6 months ago. I don't know what it is, but it's an interesting rendering anyway. And here's a humanitarian rendering, but please play with the different renderings on the side over there, as well as, you know, all of these other little bits and pieces that can kind of inform your, you know, kind of kick the interface is what I'm going to suggest here along with it.
Does anybody have any questions as we wrap up the time here?
I have, I guess, kind of a general question, just to sort of wrap my head around this thing. So when we're editing in the satellite view, and that's then sort of showing up in those other layers, then I take it is essentially what's happening. So we're just helping to create map data on those layers from the satellite view.
Correct.
That's the simple version of it, right? But that's kind of essentially what we're doing.
Right. So you're looking at an image, and the image is dumb, if you will. I mean, the image doesn't know that there's houses on the image, right? So it's just a photograph, right? So when you trace a building, maybe I can demonstrate, and that will show you a little bit. Yeah, let's. I'm just going to edit a section here and I'll show you. So it's telling me to zoom in. Okay, so here I am. I have a satellite image on my screen right here. And here's a road right here. It's a driveway. I can tap on these and you can see as I put my cursor over this road right here, the road kind of flashes red, and over in the left-hand pane, you can see there's a residential road. So in the center of this image is this building here. So let's focus in on it. It's a bit grainy, but that's okay. I can still kind of gather the outline from it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the corners of this building. Oops. There. Now, OpenStreetMap doesn't know what I just did. I traced some box, right? So there's just a piece of geometry over it. So I have to select a type. So I have to tag it. I don't know what this building is. I don't know if it's a chicken coop or an auto parts store or whatever it is. So I'm just going to say it's a building. And so that's all I know about it. I've just added a building out there, and my corners look a little wonky. So I'm going to square them up by tapping the Q key, and that brought it into there. And so, okay, now I've just added a building in Maryland. Upload. And I'm uploading my changes. And now this building will show up on OpenStreetMap. Now I can stop editing, and it's not there yet, but it will show up in probably in about 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. My building will show up there. So we're essentially tracing off of satellite imagery to add features to the map. It's still taking a couple minutes to show up. It may, surely by the time we hang up, it will show up.
and if I was understanding it right, essentially there's people that are sort of monitoring this, but it's a little more informal of looking at, I mean, making sure you're putting the right data in there, like the correct information.
Yes.
Is that what I was gathering out of that?
Well, no one's watching you. I mean, in that sense, no one's like, no one is watching your edits, but people do run. For example, there's a bot that runs through the map and it searches for vulgarities in 31 different languages. So,
but I guess so when we're looking at this, it's kind of like you got to take it with a grain of salt, the accuracy of some of the information.
Oh, yes. Positional accuracy, yes. Referential integrity is pretty good, but positional accuracy, yeah. But, if we're not, if we're not civil engineers, we don't really care about, you know, the accuracy is all relative to.
Yeah.
It's
fascinating.
Yeah, it's more accurate than what was there, you might say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Other questions? I think we have a minute or two.
I just wanted to mention.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Sure. I just wanted to mention before people sign off, we have the Massachusetts Council for Social Studies has a quick feedback survey. If you would like to fill it out, we'd appreciate it. If not, that's fine. And we understand it's at the end of the day. Thanks, everybody. And back to you, Celeste and Stephen.
I have our contact info if you need it up there. Please feel free to reach out to us.
Yes, and next week we will definitely be doing mapping, and that is a great time to start getting more comfortable with logging into OpenStreetMapping and, you know, mapping buildings, squaring them off, how to tag them, what Stephen was showing you, and then how to save it. We also can show you you can put hashtags, which is really cool when you start getting your students involved. And then you can start monitoring how many edits you and your students are doing on certain projects in all over the world, in your community or in, I don't know, in another country. So there's some few things, and I think that next week it'll be more hands-on, and everybody will get more comfortable with using OpenStreetMapping, which I think is very important to do, because I know if I'm not comfortable doing something, then it's very difficult for me to teach it and use it in my classroom. But I think next week you'll get more familiar with it, and you'll start to understand it and be able to think about how you would want to use it in your classroom. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I think you'll find it's a lot of fun too. So, you know, once you get started, it is a lot of fun. And so I think you'll enjoy it. So next week, wear your mapping gloves and digitizing boots, and we'll get our hands dirty.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks,
everyone.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Celeste. Thank you, Stephen.
Celeste.